Good evening, everybody. Dr. Jeff here with Timothy and Mr. Jim.
Hello.
Enjoying some tea. Tonight is our 12th meeting that we've recorded a podcast. It totally is, yeah. Wow. Number 12. We're having some fun.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of for those new and those who haven't had a chance to go back and listen to number 1 through 11, or any of them that bring any interest. We have really kind of opened up some fun boxes to take a peek into, Pandora's box, if you will, of just trying to answer some questions and kick some concepts around, things that you may find at some cocktail parties, but probably not, topic-wise. Really just trying to create some discussion amongst some folks that, have read a few books and talked to a whole bunch of people and practice healing arts and have dabbled in a myriad of different spiritual awarenesses and practices. And, we've also been on the planet for about a half of a century, each of us. Doesn't really mean much, but, there's a little bit more experience there and awareness and understanding perhaps than somebody that's only been here for a quarter of a century. But anyway, we're just having a lot of fun and just still trying to get to know each other at some deeper levels and tolerating each other's idiosyncrasies and different paths that we've traveled, and trying to practice love and acceptance. Even though I hate you guys. So, I'm teasing. I don't mean that at all.
Water off a duck's back.
Yeah, exactly. So last week, we were playing around with a video that Jim came up with between Bruce Lipton and Tom Campbell. And fascinating. We've referenced it a little bit last week, so go back and listen to that. Wanted to push a little bit further into that tonight.
Are we living in a simulation? Is that the
name
of it?
Yeah.
That's the name of it? Okay.
Thanks, Timothy.
Yeah.
This notion of, really what is real, and just as, kind of a very quick summary of where they started with that is most conversations and most professionally written journal articles have compounded assumptions that belief systems are made from, and one step leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And it's really interesting if you would be willing to suspend your beliefs and to actually acknowledge that in order to make a statement, there is an assumption about something at some level in your statement that you're making. And most of us go unchecked in our assumptions. And one of the things that I have loved about our meetings is that we're willing to say, hey, let's slow down for a second and push a little further into this assumption. Maybe it is a correct assumption, but I don't understand it. We just took a big jump from this side of the table to that side of the table and missed a few assumptions along the way. But I'm still holding on to the assumption that nothing is knowable. But I'm open to the idea that perhaps there are a few basic assumptions, and that's kind of what Bruce and Tom were talking about last week. And those two assumptions were that there is consciousness, and that from that consciousness we can evolve and have evolved. So that was it. And it's like, wow, that's it? There's consciousness and there's evolution?
Can you dive in, just as a point of clarification, when you say nothing is knowable, can you clarify what your meaning of that is?
Absolutely. Many people, we all took some physics and some science classes and some math classes, and we think we have some understanding of atomic energy, but we really don't. Our very best scientists still cannot tell and describe and explain and prove what actually holds the subatomic particles together from flying apart. Up until last week, we all thought that the nucleus of a cell was what was the brain of a cell, and now
they
we're
call
being
it the
told,
gonads.
yeah. So even so
Which is
that's
brilliant.
a shift. That's a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
But can we even say that we really know all of the workings, the inner workings of a cell? And up until last week, we'd have to say no. I guess we didn't. And now we may think we know a little bit more, but we don't even know that. Timothy brought up the idea of gravity last week, and and there's a whole bunch of new information, or maybe old, that's been buried and whatever, that what actually holds our feet to the planet may be more magnetically driven and electrically driven than simply whatever we would define gravity as being, that has to do with mass. And so that's what I mean by nothing is knowable. And how I got there is I thought I knew stuff.
Reality, then.
Yeah, exactly.
Is
How
there
can
gravity
you
in
know
virtual
that?
reality?
How can you know that? So
Let me be an advocate, devil's advocate for just a second. So, as a F-18 pilot,
mm-hmm.
I honestly don't know how to fly an F-18. I wouldn't want to see that. I wouldn't want to see me trying to do that. That would be a horrible thing, because I don't know how to fly that. You had some training that made you a master at such. Is it still true that you didn't? How do we square the circle on my level of not knowing something and crashing when trying to take off, and you acing?
Sure.
Okay, help me out on that one.
So we're back to the question of defining knowable versus unknowable.
Okay.
So you can learn how to do something, and that would be one way of saying, I know how to tie my shoes.
Right.
But I'm not talking about that kind of knowing. What I'm talking about, we really don't know what makes an F-18 fly. And there are some people who believe that it's just faith that makes that happen. Because you look at a bumblebee, and I mean, it's like, wait a minute, it flies, but it can't fly, but yet it does.
Anything, right.
So how does that happen?
Right.
We don't know.
Right.
That's what I mean by it's not knowable.
Okay.
And I used the example a couple of times about the magic ooze in reference to the transformation of a caterpillar to a butterfly. That's the best we can do. Like, well, we don't know how it works. So we'll call it magic ooze. Right. And look, it goes in as a little crawly thing, and it comes out as a little flyy thing. Isn't that neat?
And there's ooze somewhere in the middle.
Ooh.
Apparently.
So
go with ooze. Ooze is working.
It's really cool. What I found, so I picked up this idea of nothing is knowable from the guy who wrote the book, The Energy Cure, William Bankston. And, he's an Ivy League professor, was a staunch atheist, specifically took on the task of hands-on, using energy healing with mice who had been injected with cancers, that none of these mice in any experiments ever lived beyond 18 days. And he specifically took on this experiment to prove that energy healing does not work and that it's all a ruse and a hoax. And then it happened. It happened for him, that he used the basic tenets, the basic of believe that it can happen and hold your hands like this, and the mice lived to 19 days, and then 20 days, and 21 days. And they got these big grotesque tumors, but they kept at it, and the tumors remitted. And these mice lived out their natural lives. And he didn't know what to do with that. Because he's like, wait a minute, I'm an Ivy League guy. If I publish this, I'm done. I'm ruined.
Right.
I can't teach here at Cornell any longer. That's where he was teaching. And he's like, but I had this experience, and I got to do something with it. And so he published it, and he got into all these other forms of, well, what really happened, and trying to write about that and trying to describe that. It's not knowable. And he talked about, there's a reference in the Bible of some woman touched the hem of Jesus' garment and she was healed. And he got that idea from reading the book, and he's like, I wonder if I can believe that I can put positive, loving, healing energy in this ball of cotton, send it to somebody who can hold it, and see if they get better. And guess what? It happened. And it was defined, it was very laid out scientifically on what getting better means and what the process was. But it's like if you believe it, somehow interesting stuff shows up. But can you actually put together a scientific model and have it repeatable and provable? And because we talked a couple weeks ago about as soon as you observe something, you somehow change the phenomena, and it's almost like it's just a big joke. This whole thing is like a big joke, and the more you try to know it and understand it, you're gonna go crazy. I almost said a naughty word there. I'm trying not to tonight. I wanted to. I really wanted to. So does that help? Because I know it's a bold statement to say that nothing is knowable. So I'm really not talking about if I know I go like this on the steering wheel of my car, that it'll turn that way. Yeah, I get that part. But I'm talking about, like, where did we come from? Why are we here? What makes atomic subparticles stick together? How does the butterfly emerge? I'm talking about that kind of stuff is knowable. Why are there artifacts on Mars? Are the new pyramids that they found in Bosnia, 700-foot pyramids that have perpetual motion machines still working to this day inside of it that look like it's some kind of a laser beam, that it was involved in some war between Mars and the Earth?
What?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just that. Is that
so? I have. I want to play in this knowable thing a minute, because what happens every time that you've made that statement, any time we've been together, it instantly feels like this. It's rub. It's like, why does he keep saying that? Why? And then that's a thought that goes through my head. Why does he keep saying that? And as you were talking just now, the thought that occurred to me is, I wonder, as a way of not being egoic, if that's a nice thing to say, on one side, and on the other side, thinking to myself, is it true that you don't know? Or is it more true to say that if I claim I have knowledge, then you go the route of the guy from Cornell, looking like a crazy person or whatever all that is, and that's more of a reflection of that statement than the reality of the statement. Because the truth of the matter is, you do know. We all know to some degree, and the whole point of this process is evolving clarity and understanding. And I know if I turn the wheel of my car to the right, the likelihood is my car is going to go to the right, right? I know if I don't do my work, I'm not going to feel good. I know that. When I say do my work, I mean the things that I do that help me center, the things that help me keep me focused or aligned. If I'm not doing that, I'm not going to feel good. I know that. I know that when you introduce love into an equation, it changes the equation. You've witnessed it, you've seen it, you've experienced it. So how can you honestly say you don't know anything, or that you don't know any of it? Because the knowing part is the part that everybody avoids. And what I mean by that is, just like the doctor who didn't want to give up his position because what he knew flew in the face of the bullshit that everybody was...
It's okay.
Dang it.
It's all right.
Flew in... It's in my flow. Yo. Sorry, Timothy.
That's okay.
That was for both of us, and it was... Sorry. So the choice in that matter is to deny what you know because of what the virtual reality presents, right? You say, well, if I claim what I know, if I own what I think I understand or know, then I'm not going to be accepted, loved, I'm not going to be a part of the family. We go back to tribe, we go back to, I point to you because I think you were talking about tribe last week. All of those pieces about the human experience, which ties into one of the things that I was reading here a minute ago that it talked about. Cells interacting and creating. That community above...
As above, so below.
Community above other. Lowers entropy. Lowers disorder. But the idea of community above other. So I don't know. I'm not sure where this is going, other than I wanted to put voice to that feeling whenever that statement comes up, because it isn't that there's some investment in needing to be a one who knows, and maybe there is some of that, but that it almost seems to make it pointless if there isn't a way to or a claiming of knowing to some degree. I mean, what's the point of creating? What's the point of conscious evolution? What's the point of consciousness if you don't know anything? If you don't have understanding, if you don't have clarity of what it is you're seeking? Now, whether or not it's clarity about God, to your point, whether it's to clarity about the universe, clarity about whatever it is. I'm not saying that we have to know everything, but I just question the idea of what drives the statement, we don't know, because I don't agree with it. I don't think it's real. I think it's something to stand behind. I don't think it's something to put in front. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you have to agree. Just food for thought.
So every time I thought I learned something, what I learned became outdated.
Yes.
And then there was something else.
Yes.
That was a new version, a new copy, a new paradigm, a whole
paradigm.
New world sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the statement, we don't know anything, don't take it literal. We don't know anything for certain. We don't know anything of its origin. Like, some people would say, can you know God? Some people would say, absolutely. He shows up every time I lift my hands and praise and worship. And other people would say, oh yeah, the words speak to me, right? But, okay, where is he? What does he look like? Or she? Is that knowable? And I would say, no. And as soon as you think you do, something really weird will show up that'll just, blow your mind, and you'll go, huh, I thought I knew that. So my experience has been a lot of things I thought I knew, and I've realized I really don't. That most important things or fundamental things are not knowable. At least from what we've learned so far.
So when you think about having a conversation with the Jeffrey Smith that thought he knew, what wisdom would you impart on the emphatic, I know what the hell I'm talking about, Jeffrey? What would you, for those that might be in that might just think this is crazy, these guys are talking about not knowing anything. Of course we know things. What would you say to that staunch believer that you had answers? What would you say to that guy at the time?
It's okay to be curious. It's okay to want to be a lifelong learner. I would say just don't invest so much need to know.
Right.
Like it's make it or break it, or like your life depends on it. Just have fun with it.
Remain flexible with it.
Be open. Be open. Don't get closed. And really what Bankston's statement was, I'm the one who's been saying nothing is knowable. They like to take things and shorten them up to his most parsimonious thing you can do, when I'm really saying nothing fundamental or nothing that you have to base everything else on. I mean, here, like Bruce and Tom said, the only thing they could say for certain as far as an assumption is there's consciousness and there's evolution. Yeah. They didn't say anything about there's atoms or there's gravity or They couldn't make those other assumptions or statements.
They actually made a statement about assumptions, that there are very few things that you can start.
Right, that was it. Those were the two things
that don't come from assumption. Sorry.
No, go ahead. What did they say about assumption?
What he was saying was about love and what was the other? There was only two things, I thought.
Well, it was consciousness and evolution. Those were the two. So, what I would say to that person that thinks that they absolutely need to know, like, well, good luck with that. How did that work out for Plato and Confucius and any of the others? I mean, all their stuff is all outdated. Even Newtonian physics it's outdated, and some point, quantum physics it's already, people are saying, oh, that doesn't serve us any longer either. And it's only relative to this dimension. You open it up into fourth dimension, fifth dimension, and nothing.
Doesn't
works
Newtonian
there.
still have primary attraction for everything larger than an atom? But it's just not a unifying theory of...
Yeah, it's also based on some assumptions.
Okay.
And
everything earthbound.
when the Navy was building a new fighter bomber, it was called the A-12, and it was going to replace everything before it. And they were not able to develop an aircraft that could fly at supersonic speed, open up its bay doors, and push bombs out at supersonic speed because of the dynamics of friction and drag and
Would things
what
come
actually
apart?
happens to air at above supersonic speed and below supersonic speed, which is around 660 miles per hour. So, of course, the contractors wanted all the money to build this new sexy, super fast, supersonic bomber. But it's like, wait a minute, you got to slow down under supersonic speed in order to open the bay doors and push the bombs out. Because they literally would not leave the airplane.
Oh.
They would just stay right there,
Crazy.
bounce up against the wings and everything. It's like, no, go
Yeah.
away. It's like that booger that won't get off your finger. Seriously, that's what it was like. So it's like, okay, we can build a real fast one to get you there. But then in the moment where you want to be going the fastest, guess what? You got to slow down to about half speed. Open up the doors and push them out.
Wow.
And that was even though, well, let's not open the doors. Let's just leave them on the wings. Well, no, you can't go supersonic if you leave everything on the wings because it's like rolling down the windows and putting your arms out. You just can't do that.
Huh.
So wasn't that interesting though that all the math that was done above and below they couldn't build that bridge to be able to do that. There's still no
Physics at its
fighter
own,
that can do
at its
that.
own truth to
Yeah,
reveal.
it's like, you knuckleheads don't need to be going that fast, I guess. But or maybe it's the universe's way of saying, we don't want bombs being dropped at supersonic speed. Who knows? But so that was an interesting aha that people had of thinking that they knew and found out they didn't. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not a big issue for me. All I'm really trying to say is I love being open-minded, and I'm not tied. Bankston's statement was, as soon as you say, I believe, and whatever comes after I believe, you've now put it in a box, and you've limited whatever it is to what you just said. And he said he encourages people not to do that. By the way, he left Cornell. He went on the speaking circuit and is still to this day teaching people how to do energy healing. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah, and he's no longer an atheist. He was a staunch, hardcore atheist. And today, he's not. He wouldn't say he was a Christian, but he's saying there's some energy that when we tap into that transcends my experience of there's nothing to this other than this one life. So
would you call
that's
that
kinda cool.
agnostic? Since he does,
Call him spiritual.
yeah.
That there's, I don't know, what do you call, would an agnostic say there's something after this life?
I think they would say that they would be open to that idea, but there's not significant evidence for such. And extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So
let's go there for a moment.
yeah.
You guys had to have experienced this. It's like if you really get excited about something and you want to learn about something, it's like all of a sudden this book shows up and this person shows up and you have a
Right.
conversation with them, and the next thing you know, it like becomes your whole world.
Right.
And as that becomes your whole world and you start having experiences that then match the information, and it's like, doggone it, this is real. I'm having, if this experience is real, there really is something like that. So your statement of there isn't enough information to support an afterlife, it comes from, because I could say there absolutely is. My experience is undeniably, absolutely, I would say 99.9, as many nines you can do after that. that there is something more than this one experience here. And it's a combination of anecdotal, educational, lecture, personal experience, work in my practice, all of the above. But I still don't know what that really is.
Right, precisely. Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
I don't
But
know
you're open.
what that is.
You know something's going on, but you're not claiming to know what that is. And I think that's where agnostics draw the line. It's like they're not saying hard and fast there is no X, Y, and Z, but there's just not. They haven't had enough experience or exposure to the things that are going to sway them. But there's an openness there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I like this rub thing that you brought up, and it's come to my attention that, well, that's how I roll, apparently, is I rub. And and it's a little bit fun. It's fun for me. Otherwise, things get a little bit boring. And, I'm not one to have whatever normal conversations are. That doesn't hold my attention for very long.
Superficial drivel.
Yeah. So I get excited when I hear things like there's a new pyramid on the planet that's been discovered. It's much bigger than the others, and there's something going on inside of it that's creating energy, and it looks like it was an energy weapon.
Where did you run across that one?
Oh, hang on a second, I can tell you. But
Okay.
One of our buddies tried to make it up into the stratosphere. Did you hear that? The flat earther guy got his rocket off the planet, got up about 1,200 feet. No,
I
12,000.
did not hear about that.
No.
No? What the heck's his name? I don't remember his name. Apparently, somebody's been around for a while. He got his rocket and blasted up into.
He was in it?
Yeah.
Did he survive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What
It didn't
was
get
the-
high enough.
what was the
it didn't
purpose?
get enough
Yeah.
to prove that the Earth was flat. He wanted to get high enough into the atmosphere that he could prove physically see it, that the Earth was not round. But he couldn't even get high enough to do it.
So what he's saying is everything else has been a ruse, and we've all been fed a big bowl of lies.
Yeah, I didn't get into in that much depth.
And he by himself was going to disprove everything else. Is kind
Yeah,
of what he's going for.
Yeah, he was
Wow.
like, I'm building my own rocket. I'm going to fly the sucker up, and I'm going to prove that the Earth is flat. Missed it by that much.
Yeah. This is gauche.
But he's not done. He's got to figure out how to go into the outer atmosphere. Anyway, sorry.
I don't want to go to the other app because it might turn this one off.
I understand.
Interesting piece, just a little, I'm sure we'll talk about it more in the future, but how that's relevant to our conversation is the researchers who are there doing all of this work.
Where was it?
I want to say Bosnia.
That's what you said last time.
They believe that we're the descendants of this intergalactic battle that took place, and that the survivors on Mars came to Earth, and that we are descendants of Martians. So there's whatever we talked about in sessions 1 through however many we did on where do we come from. There's the latest theory.
The mystery of Bosnia's ancient pyramids. The Bosnian Pyramids 2017 update.
Yeah, so there's some info out there about it. So did I answer your question on, I commonly say nothing is knowable, and I don't mean that literally.
Yeah.
Like if you light a candle, we know it'll probably burn, right?
Yeah.
We may not know all of the reasons why it burns, but we know that that'll probably burn down, and if I hold on to it long enough, it'll hurt.
So what would be a more conscious and accurate way to use languaging to say that?
I would add nothing important, nothing fundamental.
Okay.
Again, I don't want to have too many words in it.
I understand.
I'm one of these guys of few words.
Yeah.
But not to where it becomes ridiculous. There's some part, if you really say that you know something, and you really, really believe you know it, and I'm not talking about turning the wheel right and you go right. I'm talking about something really fundamentally important that we're making assumptions on. You'll probably discover that there's a piece of it that you don't really know, and that you've made an assumption. Therefore, it's not really knowable. Even though the assumption may be pretty solid, it's still an assumption. Well, I didn't expect us to go there tonight, but it was kind of fun. Does that get us anywhere close to you wanted to poke around a little more into?
No, it's fine. I mean, we're tying into what that was all about, and there's so much information. I realized as I was re-listening, and you know that there's just that video is just so dense, because they're talking like, you know, they're eating cucumber sandwiches and having tea, you know, and it's just, how's the weather? You know, and that's but every third and fourth word, every sentence, every other sentence had some impact for me, because it's stuff that, while there's a lot of it that I feel is stuff that I have experienced, not from that perspective, it was still a lot of conceptual stuff coming together in ways that I'd never, that I'd not heard before or heard in that fashion. So that's why I said I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. They did that, you know. So the desire was more to what could we bring to this venue of that understanding that would forward where we're going with this.
Well, I'd like to build a little bridge for a moment.
Yeah, thank you.
We spent some weeks talking about why are we here, and one of the statements, I don't remember if it was Tom or Bruce, made to hope to, he didn't say be selfish, but it's like he's saying it's okay to want, it's okay to desire, and to create these experiences. And keep in mind, the context again is it's a simulation, and it isn't real, is what they're saying, even though it really seems like it is. That's part of what we kicked around for a week or two also in this "why are we here" idea. So they're if they joined us in that conversation, they would be saying, "Dream big, play big, show up big, play, do what you want." Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and there was that whole piece, because he talked, the one point when he was talking about the cell membrane and the receptors, and that the environment affects, you know, that the environment is created through that, right? The environment is has a direct impact on that. But that led to what you were just saying, and again, lost the thought. That was so annoying.
Receptors being affected by perception.
Yeah, it had to do with that the whole point was to experience. That's what it was. That was his words were. It's the only reason we're here is to experience.
Isn't that nice? Just to have that ease as a fundamental drive for being here, and just washing everything else away and just experience this. And that's one of my favorite things to do when I'm working with my clients, is when they're right in the guts of just what's arduous and difficult and sour and bitter and nasty and everything. I'll just say, well, what if this were easy? What if this were easy? What if you were watching this film? Would you like to see the sulking, pouty, negative Nelly in the next scene, just continuing on with the same thing, or where's the sun? Like, how do you get some light up into this thing, some inspiration, some grace? What if it were easy? And what if we're here just to experience? I love that, and that completely resonates with me. 100%.
And I
It's
also
kind.
like-
It's kind.
Yeah. Well,
It's-
and the other piece of it with that here to experience. The other thing that I love is that the words, his choice of words about. I should just stop talking. This is just silly.
It's okay.
I have no
We've all
idea what
been
that's
there.
about.
We've all been there.
His choice of word, because if it's all about experience, and that we're here to experience. Oh, the mass consciousness, the idea of the assumptions. The assumptions to me equate to mass consciousness, and that the same parallels still exist. That it's the releasing of the assumptions, the releasing of the mass consciousness that creates the space for more room to just experience, rather than needing to define this virtual reality. The more you can release those concepts, the more you can surrender the assumptions, the greater your chances of expansion are. Because now you're not attached to a viewpoint or a belief. Thank you for that.
And if you guys are wondering what we're talking about, these little sidebar things, we're in the presence of a
Magic.
of something pretty remarkable. And Jeff's the expert on it, but it's called a mind lamp, and it does a pretty good job of figuring out where there's. It's got a random event generator in it, which is picking up on essentially authenticity of conscious thought, and Jeff can hum a few bars.
I have always hated the term random event generator because it really isn't generating
exactly.
anything.
Yeah.
It's a sensor that is picking up, technically they call it electron teleportation of our thoughts. Our thoughts are a frequency and they permeate the skull. So there's a sensor in the mind lamp that detects statistically significant levels of electron teleportation, and then it's saying this is a non-random event. So it's actually a non-random sensor. A non-random event sensor,
I like that.
to me, would be a better
Yeah.
description of, 'cause as soon as you say random event generator, it's like, oh, what?
Yeah.
Again, how would that work?
Yeah.
How's that? What events is it generating? None. We're generating the events. That's my assumption.
And what is the name of the at Princeton where they developed this lamp?
The Anomalies and Research Lab. So the Princeton Anomalies and Research Lab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, it'll, based on what we're saying and what we're thinking, it'll just go into a drastic state of change of color. And right now, it's going into a deep, deep, beautiful indigo. It feels like it's its own consciousness. I had a few months with this lamp, and I felt like it was. I was looking into something very deep in the universe. I know it sounds crazy, but I would get lost in breath, and it would start to breathe with me. Mm-hmm. It would literally kind of swell in its hue and quiet based on where I went. But anyway, that's what that is when we have a little thank you for that. Someone will say something, and it'll just give a really robust crescendo for us. And what is indigo? Do we know? That's kind of that's seventh,
Sixth, and seventh.
eighth.
So I'm seeing blue as third eye,
Yeah.
and that the indigo would be crown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually blue, indigo, and violet are the chakra alignment.
Violet was the gal in Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory that ate the blueberries and turned violet.
Yeah.
You're turning violet, Violet.
Yeah, blew up like a blueberry.
So where were we before we got into the random event sensor?
I think you ought to call Princeton about that. I think that hit me the same. Where were we before that?
We were talking, I think we got into assumptions, releasing assumptions. I was saying releasing that what they're calling assumptions, I'm calling mass consciousness, same, that the releasing of those assumptions are part of the process, and you were talking about the pre-step for that, which was what he had said about just not getting words tonight, guys. The words just aren't happening. I got that far. That's really disconcerting when it just goes blank. Just like, okay, that's a little weird.
Time for some key tells.
What's the energy you're feeling? If the words aren't coming, the vocabulary's not there, what's the energy that's going on with you? Use some F words, feeling words.
I can use a few F words. What am I feeling? A lot of energy, for sure. I have recently, I don't know if I shared this with you, I had my moonstone
Right.
vanished. Literally off my body. Vanished. Strangest thing I've ever had in my life. It was there at 10 o'clock in the morning, and at 4 o'clock in the afternoon it was gone. Haven't seen it, it was on a rope, so it was not tied, it wasn't hooked or cinched, I had to put it over my head to get it on, I had to take it over my head to get it off. And what I have observed, what I know about the stone is that the stone is very, very feminine energy. It's very deep, intuitive energy. It's a very, very, very deep and feminine energy. That there's been a shift in my energy where now an influx of a lot of male energy over the course of the last few weeks, and it's been very, very hard to deal with. It's been very uncomfortable and very not weirdly, it's male energy. It's very intense and very aggressive and very angry, but not at anything. Just it's just and I'm feeling all of that in my body, and it just mostly it's fine, but as far as the feeling part of it goes, it's horribly uncomfortable a lot. And I know I'm trying to integrate. I mean, I can feel that. I know that's kind of what's happening with it, because there isn't anything in the outside world that I'm aware of that's stimulating feeling like that. You know what I'm saying? It's very random. It's just.
So what do you do with that charge? Or do you
breathe? Try to breathe more.
Do you ever put your body into like anything exhaustive?
No, and that may now be what I need to do.
Yeah.
Because I haven't been in that place for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And
even just holding a plank, just on the floor, just holding it, just to fatigue and just channel that out. And what I like to do if I'm ever doing something like that, is I like to see whatever that energy is. If I can recycle it into something proactive, I'll keep what I can. But if it's just excess static and noise in my
which I think it probably is.
Yeah, I see it pouring out of my feet like thick black smoke, just billowing out, and just like hold a plank and just see all of that stuff leaving. It's extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, so that's been a very interesting adjustment in the last little bit, and getting, because what I also realized was that in eliminating the nicotine, that helped ameliorate some of that, because it dumbs down my energy. The nicotine helps to kind of dumb things down. The smoke is smoky, so it kind of keeps, And so that in conjunction with the other kind of, it's very, very, very noticeable. Because I know that in part for me, smoking was a way of stopping the inflow of energy that was coming, because it felt like so much all the time. And now I've committed to adjusting and just dealing with the influx of energy because I need to, and that's been fine for the most part, but doesn't feel great sometimes. It just gets very confusing and irregular. So I noticed that where before I could lay into that female energy and I could go into that space and that was very comfortable, this doesn't have that same feeling to it. So I can still connect and I still go there, but then these things happen where there's just like all of a sudden there's a gap. You know, where before I could go into the concept and I could flow the concept really easily, it's like except this is weird because it just goes away. It's not like I hit a speed bump. It just vanishes. Like it was right there and there was all the words and everything was there, and then I go and there's nothing there. What is that about?
And what is the primary feeling that you have when that when you realize that it's vanished?
Well, here in this, I was feeling a little stupid and a little embarrassed because that's not I don't normally do that.
Sure.
I'm usually pretty clear and pretty
so there was
easy to talk.
Some judging of yourself
in
it?
Yeah, but I also know from past experience that doesn't really do anything for me. I mean, I know that I do that, so what I just try to do is just get calm for a second.
Yeah.
And usually that'll bring it back.
Yeah. You seem a lot calmer these days.
I seem a lot calmer?
Calmer these days, yeah.
I don't understand that.
That's okay.
Please define that.
You seem less prone to agitation. Like you seem softer, like in a good way. Like,
so interesting, because on the inside it doesn't feel that way at all.
That is really interesting. Yeah.
I mean, that's not fair. It feels, there's a lot of it that feels pretty okay.
Yeah.
But this new layer just is just an adjustment.
Exactly.
And I'm okay with that. I know that's part of the deal, but it's.
So if you were witnessing a child that was trying something new, they were obviously struggling with. Let's just say a little boy let's just say he's stuck in the mud or something. Would you change the way you speak to that child? Would you speak in a kinder and more inspired? What's going on?
I'm listening first. I think it was a way to amuse myself, because the first thought was, "What's wrong with you, you freaking idiot? Get out of the mud." And I don't think that way at all. But that's why I was laughing, because you're talking about being gentle and soft, and I'm just like, "Get the fuck out of the mud! What's wrong with you?" So I apologize, because it was good because it was making me laugh. But go ahead, please carry on, because it was good.
That's solid. I'm picturing someone struggling, a little kid struggling, and I picture you being someone that really would love to help that child. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering if you see a different languaging that you would use to inspire that child to struggle less and make the right moves to help and encourage. And is the language that you're using for yourself different than how you would be with some wonderful?
Sometimes, but not most of the time. I'm pretty patient with myself, because I know what's happened. I'm aware of what's happening,
right?
So I'm not fighting it.
Yeah.
It goes to a place sometimes where it's like when you have a whole concept in your brain, it just vanishes. It's like, okay, reset.
Yeah.
But no, I don't in any way feel down on myself about it. Sometimes I'll get frustrated if I can't seem to shift, but that even isn't really a difficulty. because I once I start feeling it building and I start feeling that energy, then I go, okay, I need to focus. So then I'll do something, you know, I'll get 14 projects done at one time or something. Maybe not 14, but
Yeah.
I'll focus the energy into something that I can, some problem-solving thing or something that I can engage for a minute, and that'll dissipate a whole bunch of it. But I like the idea of, because of where I have been, I haven't been focused in physical much. And now I think I may have to rethink that again.
You get to.
Bring it back to.
You get to, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to. It's like, it's just a calling. It's a
Yeah.
massive action
Follow
with the bodies. And we could all parlay that into some good hikes or something, and you know, it'd be fun to drop a mic at the top of some beautiful vista around here at some point. So
We got off the path from
Just a little-
experience.
We
Remember
did.
we were talking about experience?
Well, you had a
We're
purpose
here
to your question, so I'm sure I'm curious what that was.
you're so patient. You really are.
So coming to the planet to have experience. While I was listening to you guys, I heard some Shakespeare in the back of my head. Not necessarily quotes from sonnets or plays, but more about why he was so popular and why we still talk about him, as he truly was a master of writing about behaviors, human behaviors, and how they play out in all the different roles and that sort of thing. And any good TV series or show or a movie is such because they develop these characters, and we're fascinated by how people play out their desires and their interests. And some can be very altruistic, and some can be insanely selfish and have what would appear to be a pretty negative impact on other people. So I'm finding in the last couple of years, shows that I'm drawn to have a really wide range of character development, from both the do-gooder, let's fix something that's broken, to the, do you guys remember Simon Bar-Sinister from Underdog? Am I really dating myself now? So, you know, there's always been, and that little cartoon right there probably depicts exactly what I'm trying to say. The underdog trying to save the world, and Simon Bar-Sinister trying to mess it all up, you know, for his own selfish reasons. So let's, if you don't mind, let's kick around this idea of, if we're all here to have our experiences, there are some of our brothers and sisters that are wanting to have experiences that I don't want to have anything to do with. And you know, you think about Stalin or Hitler or Saddam Hussein, or you know, any of the guys that, you know, really showed up in a big way here and had a major impact. They came here for the same reason that we are here, but they're kind of operating, it appears as though they were operating on the other side of that continuum of good and evil, right and wrong, whatever that stuff means. So pretty interesting. So I'd like to incorporate it's easier, I think, for us to talk about the altruistic, doing good, love, living in the energy of love. Well, what about the folks who purposely, if you do purposely come here with the intention of operating in that other domain? Like, I'm devoted. I am coming here for mayhem. And like it or not, I'm here, and I'm going to create some mayhem. Just an interesting thought that there do appear to be people on the planet that's their agenda.
Some of the clients that I've worked with that were really difficult for me to find traction with and commonality with, occasionally I could find it, but then, you know, talking to, let's just say, one of their mothers, and she'll say, that girl just came into this world like that. Yeah. She came out sideways, and she just had a look on her face, and she was just running and gunning from the get-go, just already charged and kind of preloaded for whatever that is, and that's a tough one for me to get. That's a new one for me to recognize that not everybody is going to smell the coffee in the way that I have,
right.
or the way that I want my people I love and care about to. And I'm recognizing that is also based on on the heels of some other things you were talking about a few sessions ago, when we were talking about how some people are here for these particular roles. Some people just squeaky, easy lives and just sail off into the sunset and seem to come in that way and seem to leave the planet that way. And then other people are just laden with strife and kind of choose it. If there were 1,000 things that were good on this table, they're just innately drawn to the thing that's going to create toxicity and shame. And
well, do you think though that was true at that inception space, or do you think that I was reminded as we were talking about this that in this video that we were talking about, he talked about he specifically talked about the concept of free will, and he defined it very specifically, which I thought was fascinating, which was that free will has nothing to do with being able to do anything you want anytime you want. Free will is exercising the options that are available to you at any moment. Mm-hmm. And that's a big difference.
Distinction.
Big distinction.
Yeah.
And that to this conversation, I wonder if in looking at it from that perspective is so Joni comes in, maybe your mom thinks she came in and she came in sideways, but she had a certain intensity about her.
Yeah.
So that intensity expressed itself, and of the available choices she had, she kept choosing the left side instead of the right side.
Right.
Because her mom was a pain in the butt, or controlling, or whatever, or not, or helicopter mom, or whatever the case was. And it may not be that the mom did anything, but whatever the mom was doing forced a set of choices, or created a set of choices that she then had this limited scope of choices from, and she chose whatever she chose, and then each choice led to a different. But that ultimately, it's never about not being of or from love, but it's that free will piece then shifts. Because is it true that you can't, that there's anyone you can't get back to that space? Is that real?
That's something that I've come to terms with, that there does seem to be certain people that are committed to mayhem. Just they really they feel most alive. Their good juju in their brain is all. They seem happiest when they're in the biggest storms, And I realize that a lot of the things that I've done and the workshops and the soul journey healing stuff that I've done, that there are certain ways to get everybody to crack eventually. But I don't think that there's a one size fits all for everybody. No. I think for people that are really hungry and wanting to lighten their load and get into the nectar of what this life can be, I think that there's options available, but I don't understand what the X factor is of people that are just wanting to create chaos. And that may be just a piece of the natural law that's playing out that gives the right contrast to everything else that we're trying to do. So I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if it's at inception that person was. Have you ever known anybody that seemed like they just really didn't want to be here the whole time?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I know people that have been in. I don't know that I've. You mean that have come and gone, or maybe still be here?
They may still be here, but their energy is that they really don't. They don't fit. They don't feel right. It's a fish out of water kind of thing. It's just it's a difficult experience. Mm-hmm. Just to wake up and breathe on this planet.
It reminds me of some of the recruits that went to boot camp thinking they really wanted to be Marines, and once they got there realized, I don't think so. I think I made a mistake.
There's no getting out of that, right? I mean, that's...
Not easy.
Yeah,
you have to get in trouble and get kicked out, which they set a path to do, and out they go. Yeah. So there's this show that I've been watching called Altered Carbon. without getting too far into the details, and to tie it into our topic of come here to have an experience and choose what you want to do and live large and do all of that. There's it's a futuristic show. The idea is that you have clones. The more wealthy have more clones, and there's really no big deal in doing dangerous activities that involve what appears to be death. There's a chip in the back here that can be taken out of one and put in another, and like every 10 minutes you're getting an update so that if you died that day, you wouldn't lose a whole day. So there's people that are going like that periodically, and that's their upload or their download to the cloud to keep that thing going. But as this is developing, there's people in this futuristic world that don't like the idea of having, they call them sleeves instead of clones. You get you do something, you damage yours, and you get a new sleeve. And then the very, very uber wealthy, about every 2 years, they pick an age that they really liked, and they stay at that age because their clones are all done to that age. So they could be 200 years old, but they look like a 40-year-old. And there's a family in this show that has kept their kids as their kids because the husband really liked the idea of being a father and having the kids around all the time. So the kids never get to grow up. They're literally under his thumb, and so there's, and that you can only imagine all the weird things that would show up there, like the daughter borrowing the mom's body to go mess around because she's too young to do it as herself. Even though she's like 100 and something years old, she's in the body of like a 12-year-old, right? So she borrows her mom's body to go do that, and it just takes your mind. But there's this satellite that people can go to have all of their intricate, kinky, bizarre experiences. And this guy's a kind of a cop sort of thing, and he's trying to bust this, what looks like futuristic prostitution. But the scenarios that people go there to play out all involve death. So you get kinky to the point of death, but it's not a big deal because these people are getting paid and they get a new sleeve. But I mean, if you just think about that for a moment, it's like taking the darkest part of humanity, and that's what people in this futuristic series are drawn to. It's like that's the path that part of them are moving toward. And there's the host of this satellite place where you can go have these experiences, and the guy's like, oh, it's you've played out that scenario. Now would you like a man? Would you like a child? What is it that we can do for you next? That it's like, wait a second, this is like very strange behavior that people were able to go do because they wanted to. So I'm processing all of this, thinking, if left alone with no limits and ultimate resources, unlimited resources, how far would I go into that area? So fortunately I got to work so many hours a day, and it kind of keeps me busy doing routine things that I don't have the ability to get out there and get lost, if you will, or really push the limits on what kinds of experiences would I end up wanting to do, and where would I go with that, and would there be a consequence for it? The people on that satellite planet that were the prostitutes, if you will, they actually wanted to have that experience because they were going to get paid and they were going to get a sleeve upgrade. And it's like, no, you have to kill me. You have to do this, and I have to die, and it has to be this way. You have to use this big knife, and it has to be butcherous, and it has to be blood everywhere, or I don't get paid as much. And it's like they bought it. It's like, it's just like you're going, wow.
Did you watch any of the Westworld?
I loved that. I loved that. It's similar.
Feels,
it's very similar to that. Yeah, but just a little darker. And And these were well-to-do people. They had what appeared to be their life together, but yet there was like this really like bottomless darkness that they could move into to go experiment with that. So it just kind of makes me wonder, how far would we go with Bruce and Tom's ideas of we're here to have these experiences and go big, it's all okay. I don't know if they said that or not, but that was my summation of what their message was. And why is it that some people want to play in the dark side? I don't know what the dark side is, but I think you get an idea. I'm not saying I know where that line is.
Shadow stuff.
Yeah.
Shadow work.
And particularly because what would seem dark, I was sharing with you, the characters playing these prostitutes really wanted to have that experience. Mm-hmm. There was a benefit for them. And so we're always thinking of that as a victim, but what if it's not? I don't know. What if it's just a job? It's just a way to get what they're wanting to get. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just an experience.
You thought about that? We talked, I think, briefly. That came up at one time as we were talking here about things like, Jeffrey Dahmer. Mm-hmm. He was completely congruent with himself in what he wanted, and he focused on his desires, and he pursued his desires, and then it was over. Similar to that whole thing, but not being in his head, it's hard to know what the thought process is, because even from your perspective watching the show, it pushes all of our moral buttons. Yeah. About which are the assumptions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if there were none of those assumptions, would we equate behavior that way? If we weren't coming from a judgmental perspective of what's good and what's bad, would any of it be good or bad, or would it just be experience in the end? Mm-hmm. And based on what they're saying, if it's all about experience, they didn't quantify or qualify that. They just said.
So if we were to get back to the idea of it being an evolutionary process, what is the...
Fueled by fear versus fear.
Yeah. So what is how does that eventually help advance the species or advance the consciousness? If it's really just boiled down to those things, what is it?
Well, their premise was the idea that if that collective energy, if that focus is on love, then evolution occurs. If it's on fear, then death and de-evolution. He kept saying de-evolution. He didn't like the word, but he kept using it.
Right.
Yeah. And then finally said, "You just die."
Yeah.
But
so
but that's the whole idea: the energy up, energy down, too.
So is this primary motivator of these people seeking this experience, and us all thinking about where we might go if we were left with similar options? Is that a source of love, or is it an exploitation of fear? And like exploiting fear to the point of can you exploit fear to the point of learning to maybe a Stockholm syndrome kind of? You get so deep into the chemicals of the fear release that could be its own kind of high, and it might be mistaken for love. I don't know.
What's coming to me right now is between love and fear. If you step into that with this idea of how alive do I feel in those two energy states? Because to me, that's what's driving anybody that would want to go have a really bizarre experience, is doing so for this sense of how alive do you feel right now? And you can feel really alive, full of fear in the presence of danger. Mm-hmm. And you can feel really alive and doing whatever the most loving thing would be too. But I don't know, what's also coming to me right now is if it was sugar or salt, and those were the two, after a while you'd get tired of sugar.
Yeah.
You'd kind of want to go have a little salt.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just think about it, would you only ever want to eat sugar if those were the two choices between sugar and salt? And I don't know,
that ties into so many other teachings. I was listening to some Abraham Hicks stuff, And she was saying you can't stay in a state of alignment all the time. It's not humanly possible. And why would you want to? Because there's so much in the contrast to experience and to learn from, and
Yeah.
it's what enables us, or what stimulates desire. It's what stimulates us into what do we want? Is those moments of
Sure.
contrast. So, because people go, but I want to be in the vortex all the time. And the response is, why?
Yeah, you'd get tired of it.
You don't.
You'd habituate, just
can't,
like everything
you can't
else.
sustain it.
Yeah.
And it's funny when you were talking about the choices that, forever a dad at 40 with a 7-year-old girl or whatever. It reminds me of what a lot of turned me off about concepts of heaven whenever I was being.
Yeah.
I get to go and I don't like I don't like the idea of streets of gold. That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
It sounds really gaudy and like the.
Yeah. Not my style.
Not my style.
Yeah.
You lost me. You lost me.
I'm with you there. I'm with you there.
But doing the same things over and over and over again, singing the same praises and just worshiping for eternity. It just seems so.
That feels like hell.
It does feel like hell. It really does. That does not seem like doing the same thing over and over and over again for it endlessly. Just if I have the wiring that I do now, I'd go mad. I'd absolutely go mad.
Which is interesting and kind of cool, and coming back to their overall thought process here about evolution. That this whole thing is about the evolution of consciousness. Well, how does consciousness evolve if we don't have experiences in all directions? How can it evolve? Because you don't have contrast to compare it to. You don't have ways of feeling the difference for when you have momentum and forward motion and when you're not moving, or when you're not experiencing. And I like that idea that if it's all about consciousness and the evolution of consciousness, then everything has to apply. So even if it's to the dark side or to the dark end, or however you want to describe that, or to the more human end, maybe is the way. Because a lot of the stuff sounds like it's because they also talked about the two parts being the human part and the spirit part, and why do we have them both? Well, because you get to feel what it feels like to
And taste chocolate.
taste chocolate.
Yeah.
And that's maybe that's to the point of your show too. Is it's like tasting chocolate. It's just different types of chocolate. Like I love 60% dark chocolate, but 85 is a little too intense. You equate that across the board. Some people like it vanilla, and some people like it with peanuts and caramel sauce and sprinkles and pretzel bits all at the same time. That's kind of what makes it fun. It's interesting that it we seem to go in cycle with this conversation. This particular conversation, which is interesting to me, is that we seem to go somewhere and then we seem to go nowhere, and then we seem to go somewhere and then we seem to go nowhere, and then there's all these and there's all of a sudden there's dead space in the middle of the conversation. Like, okay, that was dumb. What's that? I just find that fascinating because it's not been our experience. Usually, it's kind of rolls one thing to the next, and this kind of feels like it's and then we're back in again, and then we're back in again. So I'm curious about that in line with that. It sparks my curiosity what the difference in the energy of this conversation is from our other conversations.
So are we somewhat saying in order for there to be evolution in consciousness that there has to be a comparison of the love energy and the fear energy? You have to be able to have tasted something that's really delicious with chocolate and then also tasted something that's really awful with chocolate, using the chocolate metaphor.
Is there the end of a sentence there? I mean, is
for consciousness to evolve.
Hmm.
That contrast is required.
Well, do you remember him when he was talking about the cell walls? That's a nice little shift. He was talking about the cell walls and the receptors, and how the information is passed on onto the source. He kept saying the source, that the cells take in the information and they pass that information to the source. As humans, we take in information from the environment, and it gets passed on, good, bad, or indifferent, gets passed on to the source. So maybe that's the whole, my flavor is I want to explore all of these things, and so that's what I'm doing.
Sure.
All of that is passed back or passed up or passed on, whatever it is. And then each of us having that unique experience is having all kinds of cool information that's being passed back or up or on or wherever it's going. All stimulated by this amazing virtual reality that we're living in.
And it does make sense to my mind that the contrasts really hone in the experience, and to get the full consciousness that we need the whole spectrum. And I think that for me personally, I've really needed the contrast to know where I am in my search and on my path. Those contrasts have just been just awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And the proverbial speck of sand in my oyster creating the pearl, just that raw space, turning that headwind into the tailwind. But it's all about contrast and finding flow with it in the experience.
So do you think that everybody already does that, regardless of awareness? I asked the question because I was as you were talking, I was just kind of seeing pictures in my head of different.
So ask that a different way, if you don't mind.
Well, I was thinking in terms of someone who, actually what went through my head was, as strange as this sounds, some 20-something gal, it was some 20-something Hispanic gal living in Spring Valley, doing her thing. And is that person doing the same thing, just not conscious that?
What does she do? I mean, we'd have
living her life. I mean, she's experiencing contrast. She's experiencing all kinds of different things, but doesn't maybe not necessarily have the same framework that we're working from, or the experience that you're working from, so that you're taking it as a grain of sand to build your pearl.
Right.
She's seeing it as a concrete block that her car's sitting on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That there is that stark, and it just sparked a question. That question was more driven from, so everybody experiences contrast. Everybody's experiencing this virtual reality. Some more from the purely human perspective, and some more from a spiritual perspective, or spirit perspective.
Yeah.
He likes to share.
Archie Bunker. You remember that? That's funny.
And ultimately, is she actually having the same experience that you're having, just not defining it in the same fashion? And I don't have an answer. It was just maybe rhetorical. I don't even know.
Yeah, and I can't know. I think that it's very plausible that she could be in her own way and what's relative to her experience, but I think it would really come down to whether or not she was in if she were open to what consciousness looked like when it was revealing itself, or when she was in rapport with it, whatever her consciousness looked like. Was she simply noticing the little shifts on her path that bring her into a wiser state, a more evolved state? So I think she very well could be, if consciousness was the objective, no matter what she was calling it or how she got there. But I think that there has to be a little bit of awareness to get to if you're asking if if there's a transparency of what my experience has been that I can put on just about anyone doing just about anything anywhere, it would depend on what was motivating them. If they wanted to have a clean heart, if they wanted to let less strife and waves in their lives, if they were learning to apply the wisdom from this experience and the lesson from this experience to the next thing, or if this is just going to reinforce the victimization of how crappy life is and how my brother beat me just like my dad did and his dad and on and on and on kind of thing. So good question. I would need more information.
That's why it was the source of it was the idea of if it's all about consciousness and we all come in from this space of love and then we evolve into wherever as a human being, are we still, regardless of the expansion of, or whatever level of expansion, is everyone really doing the exact same thing just from their perspective? So regardless of how limited that perspective is it a thing where what they're experiencing is a limited perception of the same experience that you're having, but strictly within the construct of this? I'm making little walls with my hands, so I'm trying to say that within the walls of their ability to see is that, and that's where the consistency is that yes, she's having her spiritual experience, she's having her consciousness evolve, but not in the same fashion or the same fashion, I guess, that we may be from a different experience base.
Do you think it's possible that people who are doing the same thing over and over and over and over again for decades in their life, that have this constraint, they have these walls around their experience, what is the evolution if they're not able to get outside of that? So
what if the evolutionary piece for that, say, as an example, we have we'll change the example. We'll say there's the guy who's 63 years old, living in the Midwest, has been doing the same thing for 63 years, and yada yada yada. What if his evolutionary process? What if his consciousness shift was nothing more than finding a space of acceptance for his youngest kid, who happened to be, I don't know, something different. Didn't want to be the farmer. Wanted to be a massage therapist. Wanted to be, I don't know. Wanted to be an actor. Whatever. That individual's created a space, very limited space to operate within, but only because their goal was not to go beyond that. Their goal was to find some opening in this lifetime. Didn't matter what it was, but this particular thing happens to be the thing that creates the opening. And so at the point that man is able to accept that or allow that,
right, he's
transformed. And that transformation travels back to source.
Yeah.
And in that experience, that's huge. That's maybe even bigger than what some of the things that we talk about, because we have our playing field is much larger. So, I mean, I don't know if that's a fair way to say it, but I think you know what I mean.
More moving parts, or
that our choices at the vision is broader than this vision.
Right.
But I guess it sparks that curiosity for me that if everything is designed to be in our favor, then nothing can be not in our favor. So if that's the case, then it doesn't matter.
We're getting that leap.
If there was an assumption that just flew out there.
Yeah, this assumption that if everything's designed to be in our favor, and where do we get that? How do we get there? In this cold,
There are two sacred texts that I can think of that profess that. God is, what is it? All things work together for the good of those in Christ Jesus is one. All things work together for good. And then, of course, in miracles...
Which is based on the same...
Well, it's an update, a more modern version of that.
Yeah.
But Jim, that's kind of where Jim's statement comes together. That do you see the universe working for you, or by you, or, you know...
That to me is a different conversation than it's designed to just be in our favor.
Well, hardship is also training. That's in your favor too.
Sure. Yeah.
I was, as we were talking, was thinking about the ants that go out, you know, a colony of ants, and they're all receptors of food sources, and they bring different things back to the nest. It's kind of like what we're doing.
Yeah.
And some of them bring back poison. So much so that the queen eats it and dies. And Raid goes, yeah, we did it again.
Yeah.
It's like, it's on the planet, you know. And that little ant that found that little Raid crystal and brought it back,
it was the best
thought
thing
it
in
was
the
doing
world.
the right thing,
Yeah,
right?
right.
I doubt it was like, oh, this is really going to mess her up, and we're all going to die. Probably not. I don't know.
I am not avoiding your question. I am
Simmering
in the where that comes from.
But there's an assumption that favor. I mean, if you look, isn't that like the key word in that statement you made? There's like everything works for our favor. Well, what
for our
is
benefit.
designed in our...
Well, it's another big word, but favor is like, well, what is that? Because to me, it's like, this is working in my favor. I do believe that.
Yeah.
It's hard. I'm pointing to my wrist and my hand and all.
That
For people who can't see this. That's definitely been in my favor. It's helping me make a radical priority shift in my life. And it's right on time. So
traumatic
works for me.
motorcycle accident in the desert. And how many surgeries?
11 or 12, and I've forgotten how many. It's kind of funny too.
And he's jovial about, he's pointing to this wonderfully scarred arm, and he's turning that into a tailwind. So I greatly admire that. I really do. That's
Turning it into.
Yeah.
Interesting choice of words.
Well, I have a choice, right? I could love it or hate it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
cry
do it.
about it. It's like...
Well, turning it into, just to me, similar conversation. Tim is assuming that the event was negative or bad to begin with.
Well, it was either a headwind or tailwind, using nautical terms.
But in the moment...
But I mean, it was created purposefully. It wasn't created unpurposefully.
So created. Okay, and would that be something that he's a part of the creation, or was it
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's a dance with him and Source that created that.
Yeah.
That. Okay.
That I could perceive as a headwind or tailwind.
Yeah.
And it's
Exactly.
been some of both.
Yeah.
And that comes back to the free will, because within the realm of the reality of the options that he had in that time frame, he could have chosen from any number of things within the certain spectrum. And if he had chosen this side of the spectrum, it would have gone a whole different direction. Choosing this side of the spectrum creates a different path, which is the free will aspect. So it's ultimately still our choice. It's still our evolution. It could have created. I mean, he could have turned into a very dark, angry,
And it would have been interesting to see what
horrible human being.
in a parallel universe,
who that could have become
30 years ago had happened to that guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How would he have, how he would have, where he would be at this stage of the game a little over a year later.
Yeah. That's why this stuff that these guys talked about to me was so amazingly fascinating, because stuff like that, where and this conversation about design, they talk about the cells of the body all working together, and this I don't know if I've already mentioned this, but he was talking about having enough energy, and that he was comparing it to wealth, actually. I don't know if you heard that.
Oh, yeah.
He was talking about how the accumulation of wealth and the out of balance condition, but that if you likened it to the cells of the body, the cells can create a wealth of energy, but there is a point where they can no longer hold because they don't have there's not enough space to hold any more energy.
Mm-hmm.
So that energy becomes available to the collective, to the
Mm-hmm.
whole of the
Right.
being,
Right.
and that seems to be, and
And when that ceases to be that way, and cells do get greedy, that's where cancers.
That's where disease
That's
happens.
where disease comes from. Yeah.
And so that again, that idea by design is the idea that you within this realm you have a choice, and this organism is designed in the same fashion, that everything is designed to move the needle forward, because it's all about the evolution of consciousness. So if this isn't here, what's the point?
Yeah.
If our choices, because with the incident with his arm wasn't isolated. That was a build up of choices over a length of who knows how long. Could have been 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
To where there was a course correction in his consciousness that said, "Oh, we got to course correct here. We got way left field here. We got to come back over a little bit."
Mm-hmm.
And the gentle nudges weren't happening. The gentle nudges weren't working. They were like, "Okay, you've heard that. You guys heard that analogy before? The universe whispers in your ear, and
Sure.
and they'll talk a little louder, and they'll smack you upside the head, and then bring a board, and then we'll run you over the truck or whatever it takes."
Yeah.
But I think that again, that all can be, and maybe you have to put the caveat on to say it can be forward moving, because we ultimately have a choice about whether we want to move forward. Because you can choose to move forward, or you can choose not to, and if you choose not to, then you're choosing de-evolution.
Some of the work we did previously, we talked about soul groups traveling, possibly in soul groups 50 to 100, and that if there is significant transformation of one person in that soul group, the entire soul group benefits from it. So that would actually allow for the darker things to happen. Let's say there's 50 people in the soul group and there's one that's just killing it in the positive love energy of evolving. It would afford the other 49 to really be goofing off, messing up, whatever that would look like, right? I mean, the fodder, all the B-rolls that need to be played out, the folks in the detention centers and the crooks and, all that other stuff. It would really allow that to be possible and still have the whole group evolve.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I just wanted to toss that out there for some reason, because we're talking about the groups. We're talking about groups and cells within the body. And
Yeah, and the finishing of that analogy that he used was that if you break your leg, the liver isn't sitting there resenting the fact that it's got to use energy to help fix the leg.
Right.
There's just that wealth of energy that's available.
Reciprocity. Yeah.
That goes there. And that if that was how we were operating as a society, that would be very, very different than what we are currently doing. And it's still happening. It's just more isolated.
there was a piece, this notion that all men are created equal. Right? We've heard that forever. And, at the core, you got to say, yeah. And you have to define each of those terms. But in this analogy, Tom was talking about how there are some cells within the body that require more energy.
I thought that was Bob.
To do the work.
Yeah.
He's the biologist. You're probably right. Bruce was talking about that. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily more valuable, but they do require more energy. They do require more support. And so I think, the listener was left to develop the notion that, well, okay, if that applies in that system, then in our society that would also be required, that there are some people that are going to require more support, more energy.
Yeah, because there's using
more resources.
It's using neurons, I think, or neuro. I was talking about brain cells versus skin cells,
right?
Versus.
So it's a different way of that. Helped me a lot understand it isn't just a completely level playing field,
Right.
but we're all on the playing field.
Yes. We all have our part. Whatever that is, and part of it is learning what that is, so we can fulfill that as completely as possible.
Somebody has to be the president of our country, and whoever that somebody is going to get
Well, hopefully
skits
show up
on
soon.
Saturday Night Live that Saturday Night Live is going to do a skit on the president, no matter whether the guy's super
right.
awesome or
right.
really being silly or whatever, and you're going to get made fun of, and you're going to have your lovers and your haters, right? And it's like, who would really want to do that? You know, I don't know that any of the three of us would really go out of our way to go take that job and take everything that comes along with it.
I thought that was interesting because I did think about that actually, and not, we don't have to get political, but I thought it was, I actually had the thought when he was talking about the different specialized cells and the fear versus the love aspect, that our previous president was much more focused in love, to my perspective, and this president is very focused in fear.
Yeah.
And the contrast is what's so stark, that regardless of the steps that were taken, good, bad, or indifferent, there was a sense that this person cared about the country, about the people, about things that were going on, and there's a very distinct impression that this other one does not care, except about himself and his image and all of that stuff. And that's a very powerful, I think a very stark and very powerful contrast, but that everybody has their roles.
And from my perspective, it's astonishing how both do such a great job of representing where we are in our polarity. Because I forget that there's people out there like that. I do.
Because we don't surround ourselves with those.
I'm not interested. I don't.
No.
Those people are not anywhere near my world, except for my parents. Yeah, I love them to pieces.
And my mom.
Yeah, it's interesting, but there's that they've had a lot of training to lose the critical thinking skill and to think rationally and suspend critical thinking skills, and you get a whole lifetime of doing that, and you can just add something else to that pile of not really having to think too critically about it. It's easier not to.
Did you finish your
I think I did.
thought on that?
Yeah, I did. It helped me get to a place where, because I've always kind of known, you know, like Timothy was referencing, I don't think I'd want to be in a place where you did the same thing all the time.
Oh gosh.
And you know, I wrestled with that too, and I've also wrestled with there really do seem to be some people on the planet that require more resources and take up more energy and are more in the spotlight or whatever, and there are some people really hiding out in the crevices, but we're still on the same playing field. We're still playing our role, and the roles are all important. But I really don't know that I wholeheartedly believe that all men are created equally, because it's just so hard to define. What does that really mean?
Yeah.
Right. And I hope anybody listening doesn't.
In the human experience,
It's not a racial.
Yeah.
It's not a racial thing. It's just the potential and karmic illumination, however you want to go. That's what I heard you speaking to about.
Yeah, we're all part of the family. The families all got different roles. It's planned too, you know. Is mom or dad more important than the family? Right?
Yeah.
Well, good luck having a family if there isn't both a mom and a dad. You know, right?
So I want to throw something out that I would like a little discussion about that is related to this. It's something that happened as a result of this listening to this YouTube thing with them. And do you guys mind if we take a few minutes with it?
Go for it.
So when I did my original training program, one of the things that was repeatedly talked about by the gentleman who created the process was this whole energy of changing the world, and we gotta save the world, and we gotta, this is important because we gotta create that tipping point, and that tipping point to shifting consciousness and a bit of fear-driven stuff, but this idea of world change.
Mm-hmm.
And
this is significance, huh?
it could be.
Yeah.
So in the training, I stood up in the training toward the end of the first week because he'd said it so many times. I was just like, I just keep saying this because I just don't get it. And I stood up and I said, I really love the words that you're using are lovely. The concept makes no sense to me whatsoever. It's too much. Why do I care what the world's doing?
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried about managing my world. So this idea that I'm going to come into the world and through this work I'm going to change it and make big impact in the world, and the world's going to change. I'm like, I don't care. That doesn't matter. It's not. I don't get it. I don't understand it. So in the intervening years, there have been different experiences that continue to sort of bring that idea to the front. This idea that we're one and we're in this together and we're here to evolve. The blah blah blah. So here come these guys, and they're talking about the idea that it's all consciousness. But then I kept seeing all the macrocosm, microcosm pieces. The whole cellular thing.
Mm-hmm.
Was very powerful to me because it was all about community. It was all about this idea that we're all doing this together, and that when we're in cooperation, so much more can happen. Blah blah blah. So I'm looking at that against the experiences of my own life, and I'm saying, the last year for me has been very isolated, probably almost 2 years. Isolated in the sense that there has not been a desire to engage in that way. So, like,
in what way?
It's actually progressed a lot. It's gone from I've always struggled with things like going to doing things like going to meetups and going to group events and things because I don't know what the word is. I don't think it may be judgmental. I don't know, but I find that when I go into those events, as soon as it goes sideways, I can't be there anymore. So there's usually like a beginning point where it sounds like it's going to be really interesting, and then it is really interesting, and then they say something that goes completely sideways. In my experience, that I go, that's crazy, that's not even true, or that's not right, or that's off, or the energy's wrong, and then I can't engage anymore. I don't have any interest in it, and I don't go.
Does that feel like fear or love in that moment?
Interesting question. It isn't a fear reaction. I'm not afraid of or don't have a fear response to the idea. It's what you're saying is not correct. You're trying to present a concept, or you're trying to present an idea to people that to my experience isn't real. It won't get you where you want to go. Some of that is the stuff that gets really airy-fairy, drives me batch poop. Just that kind of stuff doesn't appeal to me.
Another assumption.
What's that?
Whatever that was that you said goes sideways sounds like an assumption, or putting an assumption out there that.
Oh yeah, I mean it's whatever it is. I mean I don't spend a lot of time worrying about the why of it. It's just more like, oh okay, well that's not it either. So I'll move on from this because this isn't going to take me where I want to go. So where am I going with this? So this idea of collective, this idea of so I'm juxtaposing this, and I'm seeing my life experience, and I'm seeing where I am in my experience, and how the idea of solitary doesn't work well.
Right.
Right. It's not a fulfilling place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not attempting to be separate. I'm not looking to be separate. It's been more of an evolution. It's been a process that's occurred over a period of time, and I've watched it. I've observed it. I've participated in it. I've tried to push my way out of it to no avail, And so it comes back to, and then I come to this huge concept here and go, okay, so I'm a part of this something. Why don't I feel a part of this something, whatever this is? If this is an organism, where is the rest of the organism?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And here, I mean, we come here and we engage, and this is really cool, and it has a very powerful impact. And is this the engagement? Is this, you know what I mean? Is this where it goes? So I'm trying to understand the concept of, because you guys seem to have much greater grasp of that bigger world thing than I do. I just don't. And I don't know where to find it. So I'm trying to flesh that out, because listening to that today, I had like all of a sudden a bazillion pictures of connections and dots and things that have not quite settled yet. So I mean, over the next couple of days, I'm sure that's going to come up more. But it's the first time that I encountered a description of it that actually sounded and felt right, for lack of a better word. It felt
Congruent.
yeah. It was like, now that I can get, but I still don't. I get it, but I don't see it. And so then I thought, well, maybe I have created this space so that I could, because I am attempting to, in my own evolutionary process, to understand the importance of it. Do you know what I mean? The importance of that thing that I don't get.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it isn't that I don't, like, I mean, you look around at people all over the planet that are, you know, that are focused that way. And I just go, wow, that's amazing. Where did that come from? What does that come from? Is it the thing that I feel in my connection? Is it that? Or is it some ego-driven thing that makes them feel good because they're saving people? What is it? You know what I mean? I don't know. Because I don't have that.
Saving them from what is what I always ask.
Exactly.
You know, you talk about saving somebody's life, and it's like, well, what did you save them from? I mean, from what, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Are you still...
But that's the thing. That's where you
significance.
struggle. Is that all of that to me comes from a judgment. It comes from the assessment that you're in a worse place than I am, so I
Right.
got to help fix you.
Right.
I think that's like freaking horrible.
So what if we just switch it to help you along? I'm going to travel the path with you for a while, and we'll just kick some things around.
I think that's great, because I think that's what we do. Some people come in, some people go, some people hang, some people don't.
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the conflict is because I don't see myself, I've never experienced myself as a connector. You know, like there are people that do that.
Yeah.
You know, you tend to do that. I don't know if you do or not. I think you do. I know.
What would a connector look like?
Always bringing people. Oh, I know this person. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Connect. I do it periodically, but it's only because somebody says I have a need, and I go, oh, I know a person who does that,
Yeah.
so I'll share that. But I don't look for them. I don't seek
Yeah.
it. I don't.
Yeah.
You know. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are about that whole. I'm looking more for understanding or words about this idea of, since we're all in this world, we're all a part of this world, so we all have a responsibility to this world.
Right.
You know, so from the idea of, I mean, because it touches everything. It's everything from, there's so many things to me that are occurring on the planet that are perceptual, that have nothing to do with the reality of what's going on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on a ton of assumptions
Mm-hmm.
that what we're doing is wrong and what we're doing is hurting things. And I don't see that. I see stupid things happening. I see people doing harmful things, but I don't necessarily see that what we are doing as a whole is damage. I think it's all what it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the Earth is its own organism. It will create balance. It doesn't have a problem doing it. Has been doing it for a bazillion years.
Right.
And just because we got a bunch of ants on the top that are cutting and scarring it, doesn't mean it isn't going to fix itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what that's going to look like, probably a lot of people are going to die. But what I don't know. I don't know. But to me, that's why I say I struggle, because I don't have a gateway to get to that, and every time I look for one, it's another assumption, it's another illusion. It's not, and I go, well, crap.
Well, so
what now?
When we were talking earlier about, I mean, to me, what you just said is an identical way of saying the same thing that I was saying earlier about nothing is knowable. It's like you just kind of got there, it just in a different way of saying
Different language.
that. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
But where I could go from what I heard you say
That's
is
so interesting, and so interesting that I was responding to. Okay, I like that. That's really. Go ahead. Sorry.
this idea of trying to save the world seems to be pretty pervasive, and a lot of people want to get on that bandwagon in whatever way. Shriners, I mean, they're just every little organization's got a fundraiser to do something to save the baby turtles or whatever, pick up the trash, whatever. That's part of the evolution of consciousness. That if those two brilliant men that we're referencing for the last 2 weeks say that those are two things they can agree on that are assumptions that are solid, maybe that's our program, is that we want to make it better, whatever it is. And what is our little role in it? And it's just a core program. For some people, it's more in their face. For other people, it's like, well, I'm not really sure what that means or what my role in it is, but I'll play along at some level, at some point.
And that seems like there's a lot of humility and a lot of childlike quality of what you're describing. You're just you're simply noticing.
Mm-hmm.
What I have picked up on a couple times is that you're quite emphatic about, like, when something isn't quite to your standards, you shut it off and you bounce. And in a parallel universe, it might be interesting to see what a guy named Jim did to just recognize that wave and that impulse to bounce and breathe and whatever kind of excellent mental kung fu or spiritual, sensei groove you get into, and see what happens if you stick around and allow people to be human.
Understand when I say you use the term bounce, and I understand that it isn't a thing where, oh, he said that, I'm out of here. I always will, if I commit to something, I'm going to follow it through, and unless something egregious happens, I'll sit and be a part of the whole process until it's over, but I'll never go back. Because I can't base it on one sentence, but I can sit through the experience, and if at the end of it I'm still feeling the same way, then I will never go back. I don't mean to say that I would go, I would come to Jeff's seminar and then he said something and I went, what? And then I'm out of here. It's not that at all.
Because I heard those words over time. Okay.
It's sort of like his choice of nothing is knowable. That's my short version of that, which is a little more caustic, which is not really what happened. I should be real about it. It isn't a dump and run kind of thing.
And the moment that the thing goes sideways, if there was an opportunity to change, instead of that going into a judgment of what that is or isn't and how that's not what you were anticipating or not, if we could just be curious, just trade all that judgment and our work being to where we're just bringing compassion and curiosity to the moment. And I don't know why, but there's been a handful of times where I've heard you say, like, you're very much into letting people know that once it does that thing, that there's something that energetically you split from. Mm-hmm. So what would it feel like to trust that you would be okay, and what could potentially happen if you got a chance to just use compassion and curiosity in those
There isn't
moments.
a lack of compassion, and there's not a lack of curiosity. My curiosity isn't going to be filled there, because what I'm looking for isn't there. That's my point.
But I guess.
And so beyond that, it's wasting energy.
When I've heard you say a similar thing again and again, it seems to get to a point of judgment, where you're judging it sideways. This is not right. I don't agree with that, and then that creates a like a kind of a
switchboard.
It's a different energy, and that doesn't feel kind and compassion. It doesn't feel like love. That feels more like, I don't like it. Feels more like fear. The energy of it feels more like fear.
Not at all.
It's on my end receiving the communication. It feels like it's it turns into a fear, and the fear leads to the judgment, and the judgment gets the switchboard going. The switch, whatever that is. No. Okay.
Yeah, not even. No. It's if I choose to or want to engage something, there's a purpose to it. I don't typically do it because I'm bored. So that's usually not a good place for me to make choices from. So it isn't. It's this could provide something of value that I perceive that I want, need, or desire. So I get engaged because something about whatever is presented appeals to that. Like, oh, cool, this could be really interesting. The same thing happened with my experience of higher brain living when I first went there. It's a great example, actually. There was he is the guy that was a horrible speaker. Horrible. I mean, it was the most uncomfortable, awkward, horrible experience listening to him try to explain his process. And I mean, I was just like, and I wanted to leave, and I didn't want to be there, and I stuck it out, and there was a point where somebody in the back of the room, there was probably about 120 people in the room. Somebody in the back of the room screamed, "Are you going to get to the point?" And it leveled the whole energy in the room, and it shifted everything in the room. And that whole angsty, weird energy settled down, and then we went through the rest of it, and of course the rest is history. But there was, I'm sure at some point in some place, in some circumstances, there's probably a judgment assessed. In most cases, for me, it is alignment or not alignment. If it goes sideways, there isn't anything here anymore.
What does it mean to go sideways? To
present a concept that says, I don't even know if I have an example that I can.
But just something that doesn't resonate with you, or something that's
that doesn't. I'm trying to think of the words that will describe it. Well, that's the best way I know how to describe it. Is I don't believe I'm right about everything, but I believe what I know. And does it mean I'm open to? I'm always open to new ideas. I'm always open to concept. I'm always open to whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter to me what it is. If somebody has feedback, if somebody has information, whatever. So, but for me, there has to be a congruence in the information. So if you're trying to tell me that you know something and you're going to teach this and you're going to share this information, that's great. But as soon as your concepts don't hold up, there's nothing there for me anymore. What I thought I was there for is not there. So my energy goes, yeah, I'm done. Because what I went there for isn't there anymore. You know, I went to a master T. Harv Eccles thing. Millionaire Mind Intensive, I think it was. Went because I felt like I needed to be there, which initially even having the thought was kind of like, why would I go to that? I was like, okay, I need to be there, so I did. I went there and I spent the day there. Drove me nuts because it was rah and cheering and screaming and go spend more money in the back of the room, and rah rah, and with some concepts thrown in the middle.
Yeah, I don't do well in those environments.
But 2/3 of the way through the first day, I had a very profound experience. And when they went on break, I went outside and I knew I was done. I knew it was. Sonny was with me actually. She came and stayed with me for 3 days so we could go to this together. And I had to figure out how to talk to her and tell her that I wasn't going back. But it's that kind of thing. It's not a you suck, I'm leaving. It's not a you're an asshole, I'm leaving. Sometimes that may be true, but that's not the case. I let people have whatever they want to have. But if it doesn't resonate, I don't enjoy wasting my energy in that fashion.
I understand.
So that's where I come from with it. The switch flipping thing, I may use that too interchangeably. That to me has applied to more people-to-people situations, particularly intimate people that I'm close to.
Mm-hmm.
When there is a dishonoring or something that happens that doesn't reflect to me the respect of the relationship, that flips a switch for me.
Right.
I would think it would flip a switch for anybody. It does for me, but I don't hesitate to act on the switch flip. I don't pretend that it didn't switch. Flip, switch. I don't pretend that it didn't switch. It doesn't mean we can't have a conversation. It doesn't mean it can't be dealt with. But the fact that it happened in that fashion tells a lot, because that's all your energy is speaking at that point, saying, yeah, you don't matter so much. Like, oh, okay. Well, then why am I putting energy into this? It's the same thing. Why put energy here if it doesn't matter? I'll go put it somewhere else. So,
yeah.
So it's interesting in defining this and talking about it more, only because it clarifies more that part of me that is really looking for something. And when I don't find it, I don't want to waste my energy over there dallying in that, because it doesn't appeal to me. So I'm like, so now back to this idea of the world. And I'm like, okay, I'm a part of this organism. What is that? What does that mean? And then, but I think to your point is a really good one, which is we're all here for different reasons. Mine isn't obviously to save the world.
Right.
In that fashion. But then that speaks to the idea of significance and what does that look like. But that's a whole other day.
Yeah, let's do that another day.
Yeah. And we don't have to get into it right now, but the resistance about like having a mission to help or to not save the world necessarily, but I can assure you that there's people you've treated that if I were to interview them, they would say, that guy saved my bacon. That guy completely, without him, I wouldn't be where I am today and all this kind of stuff. So in your own way, you actually are doing it. How you frame it or how you want to acknowledge it might be secondary, but there is a drive for you to help people on a level that gets them to get them reintroduced to their potentiality in this lifetime. And for some people, that's being helped, that's being saved, that's being boosted. And the way I like to say it, I might have said it before, is that when I tell people what I'm up to, they're like, "Oh, I hear you're a great healer." And I'm like, "No, I'm a facilitator, and I'm there when really cool things are happening." But this is way bigger than me.
Yeah.
And all I am, I'm a Sherpa. I'll help you carry some of your bags. I've been down the trail a few times. I'll let you know where the avalanches might be and where to smear and stay close to the ledge. But this is you're doing the heavy lifting, and I'll help where I can. But I'm a trail guide, and that's really it.
So do you guys think in those terms, when you think in your own experience, do you think in terms of how you're impacting the world? Do you think in terms of what your impact in the world is? Do you think in terms of changing the planet? Do you think in those terms? And because maybe that's part of my problem is I think that because I'm around, in that environment, everybody's saving the world. And it's sort of like the conversation we had about suffering way back. That I don't find it. I don't understand. I don't find it. Where is it? Same thing. I don't find it in my. I go looking in my energy. Where is my save the planet thing?
So when you hear one of your patients, Jeff, come in and say, "Wow, that last session really opened me up," and I easily took a few breaths instead of just being reactionary with my husband, and he saw my grace, he saw my ease, and we both just started crying, and we had some of the best intimacy in that moment, and we were better parents that day, we were better colleagues that day. Are you seeing how the ripples of what you're doing affect the lives, the patterns, the colonies of humans and their experiences? I'm just trying to get back to the idea that you don't see, you guys aren't framing it like you're doing this work, and it's not, and how it's affecting humanity. I might be off on that. But
I can see what you just described.
Okay.
That part's easy.
Okay.
I can see them unraveling their generational DNA.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so cool.
It is cool. And so that prevails.
That's cool.
That prevails in that amoeba, and that amoeba, because of that vibration, affects other amoebas. And the next thing you know, there's systemic, happenstantial stuff going on as a result of something you had a direct influence on.
Yeah, and I probably, because I've never seen that result, I don't think about it. I don't go there because it's not something that's shown up in my world that I go, wow, didn't realize it had that big an impact. I can see their impact, and I can see, and I know that because of the depth of what they just released or the depth of what they've just changed,
that
it's
is
going to
exponential.
have inordinate,
Yeah.
But I don't. That never even enters my thought process that I can think of. But
we seem to constantly get caught up in semantics. We're all kind of saying the same thing in a little bit of a different way. But it's okay. You guys are saying the same thing, just in a different.
We seem to do that a lot.
Just a little bit, slightly different enough to not make the connection.
To work on that.
There was a gentleman that I counseled for a while that had never been in a significant relationship, and over the course of time helped him do better. He got married, time went by, they came in, they brought a kid in, and I remember holding the kid.
Wow.
Holy cow. Now this is an example of
Manifestation.
chirping for somebody, right?
Yeah.
But I don't see that he was broken and that I healed him.
Right.
What I simply saw was we crossed paths, and through that process, he had his experience, and I got to be part of that. And it was going to happen. It wasn't. I'm not taking the credit for that. But I think you guys are saying the same thing, just ever so slightly different. That it just isn't quite fitting together for you guys. I sit over here going, What are we doing? They're saying the same thing.
We should say something, because that's you should say that more immediately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because there's no point in going around that circle. If it's just a matter of that we're because I find that a lot
before. He doesn't
about
see the world as broken or damaged or needing fixing. It's just this process that we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
But yet we might say in some way we're all part of the healing arts profession, or we're healers in some way, which would imply, the word healing implies brokenness or someone in need of fixing.
Right.
But it doesn't have to imply that. It just could imply we're sojourners on this little process we're doing, and neat stuff shows up and we get to see it.
Mm-hmm.
and that's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I will.
Thank you, guys.
Jump in sooner.
We can wrap in. Yeah,
Another
please do.
time.
Please, yeah. Don't you don't have to spin your wheels listening to us go around the dance because we could probably do that for days. No, my words. Yes, your words. No, my words. No, yes, your words. That's funny.
Well, I enjoyed the conversation tonight. It was good to go deeper into what we did last week,
Yeah.
and
we tied into this.
You know, we're constant. I'm finding things we've talked about 2 or 3, 4 or 5 sessions ago are still floating back and coming
cool.
back into this.
And I like, thank you for giving us something to work with. I like the idea of us having a point of reference that we get to peel that onion on our own and see. I think it makes for some stimulating content, and I'm open to more if you guys have it. So
Yeah, because for me, I want to make sure that what we're doing, at least I'm assuming based on what we're doing, that this is stuff we want really to get out into the world. So we want it to have some value for people other than entertaining conversation. So there's plenty of entertaining conversation.
yeah.
Yeah, just to perhaps wet your whistles or the listeners, a couple of things that I was hoping we would talk about and play with. Defining what mindfulness is, because it's a term that's thrown around so much, and people are like, well, what does that really mean? Do a couple of sessions on that.
I like it.
Yeah.
And I keep finding that I wrote stuff a decade or so ago, and then I discover it again. I'm like, oh wow, yeah, I remember talking about that, and I kind of lost it and refound it. But I wrote a workbook that I called Discovering Truth, and really had a lot of fun writing it about a decade ago, and that would be fun. 250 questions in the workbook.
Let's get on that.
What is truth? And it's really fun because it makes you, like, you know, we use words all the time that really don't exist. Like, there is no such thing as cold. And everybody, oh yeah, it is. Grab an ice cube. It's cold. Well, no, there's the absence of heat. There's only heat and the absence of heat. But we have an experience of the absence of heat, and then we give it a word, but you can't go make cold. You can only remove heat. When we do that, there's so many things like that we do, that we just make a word up and we have an experience with it, and then we think it exists when it doesn't. Like the word up is, well, where's your reference point? You know, but we all use it. Like every day somebody will make that. Anyway, it's fun to dig into things that don't exist, that we all think do, and that becomes our truth. And then we have, it's really fun to play with that. So I think that the three of our brains might trip on that.
Oh yeah.
And in saying this, I'm not saying that these questions or the way I wrote it, I'm not saying I know the truth. I'm just saying it's fun to play with things that we believe are true that may not be and probably aren't, and there's some other answer out there that we could play with and grow toward. So between mindfulness and truth, those are pretty cool concepts, and we could get some mileage out of that. Alrighty?
Alrighty.
Cool. All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, kids.
Good night.